post-budget. It's an absolute delight to talk to Pranjul Bhandari of HSBC. Pranjul, so good talking to you. Thanks for taking the time out and being with us. I don't know if you are in the business of rating budgets, but did the budget leave you positively surprised, negatively surprised, or was this largely in line with what you had estimated?
No, thank you very much for having me on your show. It's always a delight. Look, I was not expecting any big wonder from this budget because it was a very difficult backdrop in which this budget was made. On the one hand, you have so much of global uncertainty around the world, which called for macro stability to be maintained. On the other hand, we have been facing weak growth domestically, on the back of which policy stimulus was expected. So, how can you do both, right? You can do only one of them. So it wasn't an easy task for this budget, but I think it has come out on the conservative side, which I think is the right thing to do. For me, the biggest thing that stands out is the fact that they are bringing down the fiscal deficit from 4.8% to 4.4% of GDP in FY26. This will preserve macro stability for us, which is very important at a time when the global environment is very volatile. We've had news on tariff last evening. There could be a lot more uncertainty coming up. In this period, if you can secure macro stability, you'll be in a good place. So I think that's the first good takeaway that came out for me. Now, within this limited space you have, because you're fiscal consolidating, I think there was a choice made that we will focus on consumption. And here, it was focused on middle class consumption. You can, argue it was good or bad. The truth is we will see the kind of things that this income bracket consumes, from consumer durables to maybe housing mortgages, which is a good thing because construction activity creates jobs. But I think this is the part of the economy that the government chose to stimulate. So, it was difficult choices, but I think they've come out on the right side.
Got it. Pranjul, just a squeeze in on the macro a little bit, and then I'll come to how you think about consumer, because I think you have great thoughts there. But one of the thoughts is that that while the central government has done what it has done, and 4.4 is a great number, right? Not too many people anticipated that, if you will. But the state government freebies coupled with, coupled with the possibility of fairly high debt issuances penciled in the current calendar because of that would raise the risks of maybe rising yields. And my question to you, therefore, is a lot is anticipated from the Reserve Bank this time around. Even before the budget, everybody started saying maybe Feb 7th is the main show. Do you think the central bank has the ability to deliver a rate cut because of what the center has done, which is a 4.8 and 4.4? Or will they have a lot of exogenous risks in mind and therefore will not be able to do a rate cut, if you will, in February?
Right. So look, thinking about the kinds of part of the economy that the budget tried to stimulate, it was mostly middle class consumption. But, we can talk about it somewhere that to balance the budget, they will have to cut somewhere. And if you see current expenditure was cut, within that, I think fertilizer outlays are a little lesser. Some money to telecom is a little lesser, some provisioning is lesser, some schemes are a little lesser. So there has to be cut in current expenditure to make space for the consumer stimulus. So if you add all of this up, it is actually a neutral budget. It's a budget in which actually fiscal consolidation has happened. And if you've given consumer stimulus in one place, somewhere else you've had to take off money from the table. And this is very important for the RBI because RBI is now dealing with a neutral fiscal impulse and inflation that is falling. We have January inflation predicted at 4%, which is the inflation target of the RBI. So inflation is now coming down to target. This opens up the space for the RBI to stimulate. And I think the RBI can stimulate in a couple of ways. Number one, it can give you rate cuts, and we are expecting 225 basis points rate cuts over February and April. Second, it can infuse liquidity into the system. It's already started to do that, and I think it'll continue to do that to ensure that reserve money growth, which the RBI creates, is in line with nominal GDP growth. So that's going to be a work in progress. Third, there could be some regulatory easing on NBFC lending norms. We're going to hear something on LCR hopefully soon. So those also could be useful. And fourth, on the exchange rate. There are already steps to make the exchange rate more flexible, which is a fantastic thing to keep our exports competitive. So these four things, I think, will allow the central bank to stimulate the economy where the fiscal was not able to do because it was tasked more with macro stability.
Fair call. Okay. Now, thank you, Pranjul. I just wanted that thing. So 25 basis points in Feb, 25 in April, you are working with two, presumably 25 each in both of these. So you do expect a rate cut on Feb 7th, which is good to know. Now, back to the budget, Pranjul. This consumption push, did it surprise you? You're right. They made a choice. Maybe they've done the capex, heavy lifting, private sector hasn't come. So they're giving some bit of grants to states, if indeed states do private capex, so on and so forth, and tilt towards consumption. Is this the right move at the current juncture of where the economy is?
Look, it's a very interesting question, and I'll tell you honestly, there are no right answers. You have to understand how things happened. For 4 years in a row, we had an average capex growth of 30% year on year. We maxed out on roads. We maxed out on a on-the-ground capability of railways. So it's going to be very hard to keep increasing money there because your capacity on the ground is not rising in line with that. So this time the government has focused on other sectors of capex, like urban development, housing, more loans to states. All of these are new. These are fledgling parts of the capex pie, and they may take some time to actually, pick up. In a way, if roads and rails also about 5 years ago had taken some time to pick up. So my sense is that there has become a natural slowdown in capex as we are moving from the old sectors, roads and rail, to the new sectors, urban development and housing. So at this point of time, it was very hard to actually increase outlays on capex even more than they have done. In fact, my suspicion is that they will actually end up with a capex which is going to be slightly lower than what they have promised in the budget. So then what do you stimulate? What is left is consumption. And then there's also a demand and a need for consumption stimulus because we know that, a lot of the consumer data had been very weak in the last couple of months. And that is why they chose consumption. And from that perspective, it's a fair choice. Just increasing the amount for capex would not have ensured the capex happens. But giving this tax break ensures that the stimulus happens on the consumption front.
Yeah.
The only thing I want to sort of warn you against is that this is, when you're giving money to somebody, you're cutting somewhere else because this is a period of fiscal consolidation, not fiscal expansion. And this is what markets will have to think carefully about. Does this mean sector rotation, or does this mean that the entire index actually rises? And you have to be very careful where it is sector rotation and where is it the entire market rising. So I think this is something that the market will have to think through, that has consumption come at the cost of something else or not.
Yeah, most certainly. Fisc deficit plus 1 lakh crores extra definitely comes at the expense of other things, and I would reckon some capex. I thought the Jal Jeevan etc. allocations also being pulled back in the current year too have been kept steady, so that is interesting. The other focus, Pranjul, and you've spoken about this a number of times, which is job creation, right? It was interesting to see the focus on job creating sectors, textiles, leather, so on and so forth, not just plain capex, but focus on some of these sectors. Did that stand out, or is it a by the way?
Yeah. So I want to take a step back. We had a disappointing growth number of about 5.5% in September. December, it seems to me growth will be about 6% because there has been some improvement in government spending. Agricultural production has picked up. And now if the monetary policy starts stimulating, then hopefully in the next 6 months, we'll move from 6 to 6.5% growth. So I have some visibility of moving from 5.5 to 6.5% growth. But if we want any growth which is higher than 6.5, and remember for last 2 years, we've had 7.5. If we want to get back to those 7.5% numbers, then we have to get some of our labor-intensive sectors to start kicking, to start doing better than before. And here there's a very interesting point. All the export growth that we've seen in the last couple of years has happened in high-tech sectors, mobile phones, pharma, which are great for growth, don't get me wrong, but they are not as great for jobs. Where we haven't done well has been mid-tech to low-tech sectors like textiles, footwear, furniture, food processing. And I think the challenge now is to actually get FDI into these sectors and make sure that we plug into Asian supply chains, because many of these Asian supply chains in mid-tech sectors are likely to get rejigged in a new tariff world. We did not benefit or participate in the last 5 years in Trump 1, but in Trump 2, we have this opportunity that we plug in and we start actually producing a lot of these mid-tech goods and start selling them to economies like the US. I think that's a big opportunity that we have at this point of time. And from that perspective, I think the budget did have some tick marks. For example, it reduced intermediary good import tariffs, across several products. It spoke about how to make exports easier by better funding to small export MSMEs, more hand holding. It spoke about how to bring down the regulatory cholesterol, although that will take time. It's like a 1 year long sort of review that's going to happen. But I think the right tick marks were made in terms of where they want to go. The challenge will be to get there quicker rather than later, because a huge opportunity is opening up in front of us. I think supply chains are getting rejigged once again. It's our chance to go and grab the opportunity.
Got it. One final question, Pranjul. The global macro tariff skirmishes or noises being made already, could it be a big headwind to export growth? I mean, nothing is known. As of now, I don't think too many people know, but you make a hypothesis, right? So what's your hypothesis?
Look, you're right. If trade flows around the world slow, and then there is very lot of uncertainty that something new can be announced tomorrow or day after, and we don't know which country it will be announced against, then there's a huge scope of uncertainty. And generally, when we see this kind of global uncertainty, FDI flows, investment flows actually go into a pause mode. Which is not good for growth. So I do have a growth forecast of 6.5% for FY26, but I would say loudly and clearly that there are risks to the downside, because if global environment remains challenged, then India is a part of this global stage, and India will also have a problem. My only small point here is that we can also look at it as a window of opportunity for us to really expand and try to plug in to the global value chain in a way we have not done before. So I hope we focus on the opportunity rather than the fact that, right now things look quite uncertain and challenged.